Hi, in this video I'm going to be talking about the focal length of lenses and what we use those various focal lengths for. I'll be talking in terms of the 35mm equivalent. Back in the day we used 35mm film. We have full frame 35mm cameras as well. The reason I'm talking in terms of the equivalent of 35mm is because how a focal length looks depends on the size of the sensor. So if we don't have a common standard point, it doesn't really make a lot of sense to be talking about focal length of lenses. You have two different kinds of lenses. You have prime lenses. They have a fixed focal length. So this lens on the left is a 50mm lens. That's all it is. The one on the right is a zoom lens. So it can be a 24mm lens, or it can be anything up to a 105mm lens. The benefit of a prime lens is you can make them faster. So this lens on the left is a 1.4 lens, so it can have an aperture up to 1.4. The one on the right is an f4 lens. It can only have an aperture up to maximum of f4, which means the one on the left can basically suck in at 50mm 8 times as much light as the one on the right. There's also less distortion in general with your prime lenses than with your zoom lenses, because the zoom lens has to correct for a whole lot of different focal lengths. But obviously your zoom lens is handy because you can choose your focal length as you go. The widest you can go in terms of focal length is 8mm, or 8mm circular fisheye. This circle effect that the lens creates is what the image that the lens creates. It's not a effect in Photoshop. All cameras have a circular image circle. They tend to fade to black rather than have this harsh edge that a circular fisheye has. But the sensor is basically smaller than the image circle on most lenses, so that's how you end up with your rectangular image that the camera creates. With a circular fisheye, the sensor is actually bigger than the image circle, so we actually can see the whole image circle. But it takes in a whole 180 degree with huge distortion. You can see how it's bent the light to fill all that information in. So this photo would have been taken with the camera on its back, pointing up, and everything in front of the camera, so everything above the camera would have been taken. I don't own a fisheye, but fisheyes are at around 15mm. That's about as wide as you can get. Again, they distort the image, so they create this barrel distortion. This is from Dublin Photography, this image. I can't remember where I got this one from. So where you expect lines to be straight, they've actually been warped. You can create fun effects with them. So they're a fun lens to use, but you wouldn't necessarily use them for architecture, so because your beams and so forth are going to be bent. You can fix it in software, so they're a lot more useful in the digital age than they were back in the day, but they have their limitations. It's a bit of a niche lens. Ultra wide is anything less than 24mm, so these are 14mm photos. They're actually not as wide as the ones before, the 15mm, because they're corrected. And by corrected, what I mean is if you look at the straight edges, they're straight in this image. So wide angles, what they do, wide angle lenses, they bring more of the photo in, like more of what's in front of the camera gets sucked into the lens. But they also exaggerate distances. So the end of this hole to where the person is taking the photo, well me, it looks longer than it really is. They also, to achieve this correction where the lines are straight, it actually has to distort the image. So you'll notice that people on the edges of the photo look wider than they are than they would be in real life. So it's not a flattering thing to take photos of people. You have to be quite aware of the fact that it's distorting the image. Wide angle is anything from 24 to 35mm is generally regarded as wide angle. Again, it brings more of the image in. So if you have a person in a photo, you would have more of the background even with a wide angle lens than if you had a normal lens. So if you had the person the same size in the photo with a normal lens or a telephoto lens, you'd see less of the mountains than you would with a wide angle lens. Again, it distorts the distances between things, so you can use that to create drama. So you can make these planes look more exciting than perhaps they really are, because it makes the front of the plane look further away, the back of the plane look further away than the front of the plane. You can use it for portraits, but you've got to be aware of the distortion. So it creates kind of a cartoony effect. So because I've taken it from above the models, their heads look smaller than their bodies. So it's kind of a cute effect. You can use it to take portraits, but it's not a classical portrait focal length. Your normal range, 35 to 60 mil, it's called the normal range because it's what our eyes see. And the distances between things are how they are in reality. So the distances between that audience and the dancers are pretty much what was the perception is what it really was. These lenses are good because well, certainly the 50mm focal length is the cheaper end of the spectrum in terms of lenses. They're still quite expensive because lenses are expensive, but they're a bit cheaper. You can make very fast lenses in the normal range, so for freezing action, they're very good, and they're representing what reality is, so that's good as well. If you're doing a full body portrait, like what's called an environmental portrait, then this is a good range to be taking it in. The portrait range is your 85 to 135mm range, so it's in the telephoto range, so it's zoomed in basically. What telephoto does is make things look closer than they really are, and it also brings the distances between objects closer. So these trees look closer to the model than they were in reality, like if you were actually there looking at it. The reason this is the portrait range is because it's the most flattering range for taking photos of people. That the compression effect actually looks good on people's faces, so the compression works on the face as well, so the nose to distance to the ear, the distance between those two things is compressed, and as much as that doesn't sound flattering, it is actually flattering in photography. So if you're doing a half body portrait, you're probably looking at the 85mm range, which is what these are taken at. This is taken with an 85 1.8mm lens. If you're just doing a face portrait, so just the head, then you'll want a little bit more telephoto, so sort of your 135 range. I've already sort of discussed in the portrait thing what a telephoto lens does. It makes things closer than they are in reality, and it compresses the images. So these are all 200mm lenses, I think, not 200mm zoom lens. So it allowed me to get closer to the band. The compression I don't necessarily want, that like the drums in the background look closer than they really are. That's just really a kind of a side effect more than something I necessarily want to achieve in this particular case. But they're if you want to get close to your subject matter, telephoto is the way to go. And that's all the focal lengths I want to talk about.